everyone. Welcome back to Din and Daf. This is Elana Stein Hain. And today we are going to talk about something that comes up in Makot a number of different times in this week's daf. Comes up on Yudal Amid Bet Ted Vav Amid Aleph, comes up on Ted Zayin, comes up on Yud Zayin. And the topic is Lav Hanitak La'aseh, right? Where you have a negative commandment followed by a positive commandment that seems to undo its effects, right? So if you violated the negative commandment of not sending away the mother bird before taking its chicks, if you have violated it, there is then a kum v'aseh, there is then a positive commandment of, well, actually, you can send away the mother bird and you won't get malkut anymore. This is really, really interesting. The idea called lav hanitak la'aseh, the idea that if I transgressed a negative commandment, I can somehow avoid getting malkut because I either have the potential or I actually will do a positive commandment that seems to somehow either replicate the thing I didn't do before, or maybe fix or undo the consequences of what I did before. But this is very interesting because essentially what it's saying is I did an Aveira, and yet I'm not going to be punished for that Aveira because it seems like I have a second chance, or like I have a chance to make it right, or maybe because even if I haven't made it right yet, there's a potential to make it right. And I think it's an interesting question philosophically. What is the logic surrounding the question of giving second chances and not just giving malkut? Because on the one hand, I would say I understand, you're saying you have an opportunity to fix this. So I want to give you that opportunity to fix it. But on the other hand, doesn't that also open the door to a kind of exploitation where a person is going to say, okay, so I'll just violate the tase, and then I'll do the essay afterwards and it'll all just be fine, right? So I think to me, that's what grabs me about this question. So I want to look at some of the parameters of this rule of alav hanitak la'aseh, not getting malkut for the person who did the lav, who transgressed the lav, and see where it goes in terms of that philosophical question. So let's take a look at the Mishnah in Makot that shows up in your Gemara on Daf Yud Daled, Yud Zayin, Amud Aleph. And it goes like this. It's giving you the classic case of alav hanitak la'aseh, which is lo tikach em al banim, you cannot take the mother bird with its babies, and afterwards shalech ta'im, send the mother bird away. So what happens is the Mishnah of if hanotel emal habanim, somebody did take the mother bird with its chicks already. Rabbi Yehuda omer loka ve'eno mishalech. Rabbi Yehuda says, sorry, one strike, you're out. You get malkot, and you can no longer send away the mother bird. When we say shalech ta'im, it means you should have sent it away before, right? The Chachamim say no, mishalech ve'eno lokeh. You can now send it away and still not get malkot. Zaklal, here's the rule: kol mitzvat lo tase sheyesh ba kumaseh, any negative commandment that has a go and do positive commandment that either, undoes the wrong that you did or at least mimics what you should have done, right? You don't get a punishment for it. You don't get malkot, right? It makes it sound like if you have a mitzvah aseh possibility of I'm going to now send away the mother bird, even though I'm late and I already transgressed taking everybody together and not sending away the mother bird. Well, I can be mishalachat, I can send away the mother bird, ve'ena loka, and I'm not going to get malkut. Okay, that's what it sounds like. Now it's interesting. It also could be read because of the zehaklal. It could be read simply that any mitzvah lo ta'aseh that has a positive commandment attached to it, you're not liable lashes for it, whether you actually do that positive commandment or not. Now, that may sound a little bit weird, but first of all, categorically speaking, we might just say, as you've been seeing in the Gemara this week, we only give malkot to lavim, to negative commandments that are similar to lo tachsom shor b'disho, that you should not muzzle an ox when it is doing its farm work, right? That is not a lo ta'aseh that comes with an aseh afterwards. It's not, well, if you muzzled it, then you should do X, Y, Z, feed it extra later. There's none of that. So it could just be categorically speaking, we just don't give malkot because the paradigm for giving malkot is lo tachsom shor b'disho, which is a very straightforward. You cannot, and there is no kumbase afterwards. So maybe if there is a kumbase, like shalech to shalach ta'im, then we don't give malkot, right? But the first part where Chachamim said mishalech ve'ein lokeh, does it mean if you send away the mother bird, then you don't get malkot? Or does it mean you can still send away the mother bird and not get malkot? Like, I guess the test case would be, what if I haven't sent away the mother bird yet, but the mother bird's still there? I could potentially send it away. Is it possible that I cannot be chayevet malkot until there's no longer a possibility of sending the mother bird away? Or is it, if I send the mother bird away, if I'm mishalach at the mother bird, then I don't get malkut, right? Like those are two different timelines and causation lines. And that's going to come up. And it did come up in our Gemara. And it's really, you can already see it brewing in the Mishnah in the way that you read it. You know, when you look at the Tosefta in Makot, Tosefta in Makot, I think is much, much clearer. And it goes like this. Hanotel im al habanim, somebody who took a mother bird and its chicks. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Yossi Aglila, and Rabbi Yehuda is going to sound different here. Kol over lo tase, anyone who violates a negative commandment. She'avru al mitzvat lo tase sheyesh ba kumase, right? Who violated a negative commandment that has a positive commandment that parentheses might be able to fix it or undo it or mimic what you should have done, right? Close parentheses. Im kimu et mitzvat haseh sheba pturin ve'im lav chayavin. If the person actually goes ahead and fulfills the aseh, sends away the mother bird, then they don't get malkut. But if not, they have to get malkut. That makes it sound, if you do the aseh, no malkut. Not just if there's a potential to do the aseh, but if you actually do it. Now, I want to say, you might notice, those who are looking at the text, you might notice that it doesn't say im kimu et mitzvat ha'aseh, okay? Actually, some of the texts that we have at the Tosefta, it actually says what most people think is not what the reading should be. It says im kimu et mitzvat lo ta'aseh Shabbat, which is nonsensical. So I took out the lo on the basis of some mafarshim and just left the ta'aseh, right? If you do the essay. But suffice to say, we have this question of, well, at what point do you no longer get lashes? Is it only if you do the essay, which means we're giving you a second chance, but you better do it? Or is it even if you have the potential to do the essay, right? But you just haven't done it yet. But you can't be Chai Malko yet because there's still a potential to do the essay, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And what I would say is, what those who learn Daf Yomi will notice that in the Gemara, it seems like the way to talk about this issue is whether you speak about this as kiyem pater, lo kiyem chayav, right? If you fulfilled the mitzvah aseh, then you're exempt from lashes. But if you didn't fulfill it, then you have to get lashes. That's one way to put it, which makes it sound like you have to really do the aseh in order not to get lashes. And the other is bitel velo bitel. If somebody nullified the aseh, then they get lashes. But if they didn't nullify the assay, but it doesn't sound like they actually did the assay, they just didn't nullify it, they didn't make it impossible to do the assay, there's still potential to do the assay, then they still don't get malkum, right? So that's the conversation. Kiyem lo kiyem, bitel lo bitel. Kiyem lo kiyem sounds like you have to do the assay in order to be exempted from malkut. Bitel lo bitel sounds like you're always exempted from malkut because you have the potential to do it, unless you make it impossible for yourself to do the essay. Maybe you kill the mother bird, God forbid. I mean, I don't know, God forbid, maybe you're eating it for dinner, right? But you kill the mother bird, okay? So what I want to look at is a timeline, a spectrum of views on, well, what, when, what do you have to do in regards to the mitzvah say in order not to get malkut? And I think each one of these, and it's really a timeline. I could ask it as, do you have to fulfill the mitzvah say? I can also ask it as, when do you have to fulfill the mitzvah say? Right? And no surprises here. Here are the four positions. One position, you have to fulfill the asay toch kedei dibor within seconds of when somebody warned you that what you're doing is usher by pushing away not pushing away the mother bird. Toch kedei dibor, meaning the asay has to be like basically connected to the lo ta'aseh. Like you just violated the lo ta'aseh, you're gonna do the asay immediately toch kedei dibor so that it's as though you never did the lo ta'aseh, right? That's not really a second chance. That's more like, okay, what do we consider the action that you did? If you actually sent away the mother bird, like within toch kedei dibor of taking them all together and being like, oh, somebody gives you hatarah, somebody gives you warning and says, you shouldn't do that. You're not supposed to do that. And if you do that, you're going to get malchut. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to send away the mother bird. That's, to me, that's not, I mean, maybe it's a little second chancey because they give you hatarah, but it's less prone to exploitation. The second is maybe you have to do the assay when Beit Din is trying to sentence you about the lo ta'aseh that you did. So you're taken to Beit Din because you didn't send away the mother bird. And Beit Din says, okay, look, you can either get malchut or you can send away the mother bird now. Make a decision, right? So if you do what Beit Din says, you're not going to get malchut. If you don't do what Beit Din says, you are going to get malchut. Now that is a little bit of like a second chance kind of situation, but you really have to do it, right? Kiyem lo kiyem, you really have to do it in order to not be chayav malchut. Then there's a third possibility, which is actually, so long as there's potential for you to do the assay, you don't get malchut. Whoa. What does that mean? That's like real latitude. And then the last one, all three of those were really kiyem, lo kiyem. They were, if you upheld the assay, either toch kedei dibor according to one, or when Beit Din told you to, according to another, or you have the possibility of doing it because it's still alive, right? Those are all according to that way of thinking. But then there's bitel lo bitel. There's also a way of thinking, and this is the furthest on the stretch, which is so long as you don't actively kill the animal, we can't give you malchut because you didn't show us that you don't want to do the assay, right? You didn't show us that it's impossible to do the assay. You didn't bayadayim with your hands change it, right? And that to me is kind of interesting because if you say there's potential, there's still potential. As long as there's still potential, right? Then you can do it. But if it dies on its own, you didn't do it. We say, sorry, you're going to get malchut. That's it. We gave you a second chance. You didn't make it. But when it comes to, we let you even wait till it dies, you just can't kill it yourself. That's already, I think we're giving ourselves a little too much room for exploitation. All right. So let's look at each one of these briefly. So the toch kedei dibor of the warning that you get not to do it, that shows up in Rashi in Chulin on Kuf Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, which is where the conversation about Shiloh Haken takes place. You can also find it as one shita in Tosfot here in Makot on Tedvav Amud Aleph. And he basically says, Dekay Malan, we think toch kedei dibor dami, right? Meaning the toch kedei dibor, doing something within, think about it from a dibor perspective immediately. I say something and then I, say something immediately after that within a word or two. It's like the original utterance, right? So we would basically say, toch kedei dibor, if I was able to do the asay, toch kedei dibor, it's really like the first thing that I did. Like the lav does not fully it just doesn't fully get logged, because I do the assay. And likewise, once the dibur is over, meaning once that trial happened and told the dibur I didn't do the assay, what's happened is I've now been over on the hatra. I have now violated the warning that somebody gave me, and of course I'm chayv malkut, right? So it's only tocha de dibur, and it's really a hatra issue. I violated the hatra, and that's it, right? And one way of looking at it. The second point along our timeline, when Beit Din tells you either get malkut or do the assay, right? So we find that the Nimukei Yosef, he says basically, miyad kishehitru bo Beit Din letakin halav. When Beit Din, and I like the language of hitrubo here also, of a hatra, of a warning, Beit Din says, we want you to fix this lo tase that you did. The lo tikin, and the person decided not to fix it, right? Makes it seem like the assay is a type of fixing, right? Shuv ein lo takana letaken oto. There is no longer a possibility of fixing it. Viloke, and you get malkot, right? Meaning this, in some ways, it sounds like Beit Din is what formalizes the possibility of this as tikkun. And when they tell you you should do it and you don't do it, it's too late. It's over. So similar to how we said in the first example, you violated the hatra of that person, of the edim who were saying you shouldn't be taking the mother bird. Here it's like you violated the sentence of Beit Din. Beit Din said you have to do this, and if you don't do it, you don't have a possibility anymore. But the last two on the timeline, I think, are the most interesting for the question of, can it become exploitative? What is it going to look like? So let's look at the Rambam for a second. The Rambam seems to be taking the perspective of, so long as there is still a possibility to be mekayemet the assay, to do the positive commandment, right? You don't get malkot, right? So look at the example, or one of the examples. It says in Hilchot Matnot Aniyim, avad kol hakatzir, shekatzar or nisraf, kodem shenatan hapeya, hareze loke, right? If the harvest was completely reaped, or got destroyed in a fire, before you were able to give peya, you get malkut. Why? Because you have violated a negative commandment of you're not supposed to take pe'at sadecha, and you can't do the positive commandment of la'ani v'lager ta'azovotam, leave them, right? Because they're destroyed. Notice, you didn't necessarily in each of these cases destroy them. You didn't necessarily burn them. You didn't purposely say, I don't want to do this assay, and therefore I'm going to destroy them and I'm going to show everybody. It just happened that way. It just happened, and there's no possibility of the assay. But as long as there's a possibility of doing the assay, you're still good. And then he gives another example. And what about leket? When you drop in your harvest a few pieces. Kishekutzer ume'alem lo yelaket hashibolim hanoflot b'shat hakatzir ela yanichem la'aniyim. Right? When you are harvesting and binding your sheaves, right? If you drop some of them drop, you shouldn't pick them up. You should leave them for the aniyim, right? The leket kitzircha lo telaket, excuse me, right? You shouldn't pick up your leket, right? Avar ulekatan, but let's say somebody did, right? You did a lo tase. Afilu tachan ve'afa noten la'aniyim. Even if you already ground them down, and you bake them, you can give them to the aniyim. Shene'amar, as it says, la'ani v'lager ta'azovotam. You give them to the ani and the ger. There's your kum v'asay, or kum asay, right? Avdu onisrafu achar shlakatan. But if they got lost or destroyed after you pick them up, kodem shenatan la'aniyim, before you give them to the aniyim, you get malkot. Right? So what we're looking at there is not you tried to destroy them, you tried to do something to show that you didn't want to do the essay. It just happened that way that you can no longer do the essay. And when that is the case, you do not have an out from your malkot. Right. So here we have something a little more complex. We're basically, I don't know that we're giving the benefit of the doubt per se, but I think what we're really allowing to happen here is we're saying so long as there's still an opportunity to do the assay, we are not going to give you malkut. We are not going to punish you. Right? That already, I think, opens us up to the question of where is that going to be wow, I really appreciate that. And this will give me the opportunity to do the right thing. And where is it going to be people are going to take advantage and do the wrong thing and specifically not give that leket and just assume that they won't get malkut, right? But the fourth on the timeline, which is really according to the betel lo betel, that you really have to be in order to get malkut, you have to be mivatel the assay biyadayim actively. You yourself would have to burn the leket. You yourself would have to kill the mother bird rather than them dying of their own causes in order to get malkut. That is the most uh I'd say it's the most makil. It's the lightest in terms of punishment of what the person did. And I think that the way Rashi presents this perspective, even though this is not really what we seem to hold lahalacha, but the way that Rashi presents this perspective, I think is really, really interesting. You can look in Mako Tetzayin Amud Aleph to, see where this concept of being mivatel biadayim or mivatelet biadayim would come up. But I really like the way that Rashi says it. If you were trying to look at the idea of the lav being talui bevitol haase, right? That the lo ta'ase is actually dependent in terms of its requirement of punishment on nullifying actively the positive possibility, the positive commandment, ואינו נגמר עד שיבטל את העשה בידיים ביטול עולם. And it has not been completed, meaning the masa avera of the lo tase that you did is not considered complete to require malkot until you actively nullify, actively, biadayim just means actively, in a permanent way, the asay shelo yuchal lihitkayem, right? Od, right? It will not at all be able to be performed, right? So it seems like if we look at these four approaches of, is it that you have to do the asay immediately, tol kedei dibor of the lo ta'aseh, we look at that and say, what we're really saying is you have a chance through the hatra to do the right thing, but that's it. The lo taseh and the aseh have to really be so close together that it's almost as though you never did the lo taseh. The second approach, it has to be when Beitin says, look, you committed a lav. We are going to give you malkot. If you don't want to get malkot, we are offering you a way to fix what you did. Go fix what you did. But it's under the aegis of the Beitin saying, go do this. That is your one and only chance. The door is not open forever. It is allowing for a possibility of takana, of fixing of what's been done. Not that you didn't do anything wrong to begin with. You absolutely did. The ma'aseh happened, but we're offering you an opportunity to fix it instead of getting punished for it. The third approach of it's actually kol od, so long as you can still do the aseh. It's still possible to do the aseh. We won't give you malkot, makes it sound like actually the aseh is always there as a possibility for the end of the story, instead of just the lav being the possibility. Now, is that because we consider it as though the lav is not fully done until the aseh can no longer be done, perhaps? Is that because there is a possibility of fixing the lo ta'aseh that you did wrong, similar to the position of Beit Din? I'm not sure, but it does seem to leave the possibilities open. And the most makil approach, which we do not follow the halakha, that the only way you can get malkut is if you are mevatel the aseh biyadayim, makes it sound like, and this is the way Rashi really puts it, the way that we know that the avera has been done, the ma'aseh avera is lo nigmar, has not been completed until you actively foreclose on the possibility of the aseh. And that, we said, has a lot of possibility for, exploitation. But what we do see here is basically a question of how many second chances do we give? How long do we give people for a second chance when there's a potential for a second chance if they don't take it? Should we be waiting for them to take it, or should we be punishing them, right? And I think these are really important philosophical questions, let alone, by the way, when you think about some of the mitzvot here that are going to impact other people, like whether you're going to give the leket or not. Or a major example that comes up in the Gemara and Makot is, a rapist who, Rahman al-Itzlan, a person raped another human being, and the Torah, in order to protect that survivor of rape, the Torah has her rapist marry her, which today we would find very, very psychologically damaging and dangerous, and would not. We would very much not just not advise. We would probably actively prevent. He's supposed to marry her, and she's supposed to be married to him for their whole lives. And let's say he divorces her. Does he get malkut? He's not supposed to divorce her. It's a lo ta'aseh. But he says to the Beit Din, "Oh, what do you mean? I'm going to marry her next week." And then he doesn't marry her. "What do you mean? I'll marry her in 3 weeks." He doesn't marry her. And the only way we would give him malkut is if he is mevatel somehow the possibility of an aseh bayadayim, meaning he would make a neder. You can never get hana from me. You can never get pleasure from me. And he makes a neder in such a way that he cannot get the neder undone, meaning forever there is no possibility of him marrying her ever again. That's the only time he would give us, we would give him malkut. Well, you better believe that would have very, very negative effects, right? Very, very negative effects on other people. So all this triangulation of what is fair to the perpetrator, what is fair to the victims of the perpetrator, or those who lose out because of the perpetrator, what is the right thing from the perspective of a legal infrastructure that is trying, a justice infrastructure that's trying to keep people from doing averot and not just punishing them for the averot that they did, but keep them from doing averot, and also trying to figure out if these things can be fixed in one way or another. So thanks for learning with me, as always. And I know these are evergreen, but don't forget to count the omer.